From mermaids spotted in World War II, plus an African construction site put on hold due to mermaid attacks, here are 10 of the most legit mermaid sightings and stories. (1943) Kei Islands Mermaid. Starting our wild mermaid tales today is the 1943 incident in which Japanese soldiers allegedly spotted a mermaid in the middle of World War II. This happened at the Kei Islands in Indonesia, a place with white sand beaches and gorgeous scenery. The Japanese soldiers were stationed with a surveillance team on a small island in the region when they supposedly saw strange creatures in the water that had the limbs and faces of a human, but the features of a carp. The Japanese soldiers also claimed that the creatures had pink skin and spines that stuck out of their heads. But unlike traditional mermaids, these beings did not have fishtails. By the way that the Japanese described it, it sounded like they saw the thing from the Black Lagoon. So were they beautiful mermaids or disturbing sea monsters? It's unclear, but the truth must be out there somewhere. It's possible that they were strange fish covered in coral or barnacles, maybe even a narwhal. Scientists never really found out the real answers. Apparently, soldiers would see these weird creatures cavorting near beaches and lagoons mostly in the night. They also witnessed them on the beaches at dusk, but the supposed mermaids would then quickly sprint into the water and dive below the waves when spotted. So far as the story goes, even the local villagers knew all about the human fish creatures. They called them orang ikan. But whether these freaky fishermen were real or not is anyone's guess. Israeli mermaids. As recently as 2009, mermaids have been spotted in Israel, in specifics, the small beach town of Kiryat Yam. According to Live Science, people reported seeing a mermaid at dusk, and the mermaid would perform tricks for locals and tourists. This mermaid was supposedly a young woman with the bottom half of a fish. She was first spotted sunbathing, but when she got caught, the mermaid leapt to her feet and disappeared into the ocean. And while you might think this is just total nonsense, the sighting was not isolated. Hundreds of people came forward in Kiryat Yam claiming that they too saw the mermaid. The mermaid became so popular that the town council offered a $1 million reward for any evidence that the creature really did exist. It should not come as a surprise to you that as of now, over 10 years later, nobody has yet to earn that $1 million. What happened in 2009 was probably a bunch of crazy stories feeding off of other crazy stories and people getting way too excited. What's the most striking example you have ever witnessed of someone making up a rumor and getting others to believe it? Was it gossip in grade school? Was it a religious cult or some so-called mystic or shaman? Let me know what happened and whether or not you believed it. Then remember, if you liked this video, you should definitely subscribe to keep up with all the great videos here on Talltanic. Canadian Mermaid. Our next story takes us to Canada, to June 1967, British Columbia. This was the month that a mermaid was apparently spotted hanging out on the shore of Mayne Island. A whole group of people on a ferry claimed that they witnessed a blonde woman sitting on the shore. She was topless, gorgeous, had long blonde hair, and the tail of a porpoise. Apparently, she was even snacking on some raw salmon. Unlike most sightings, this one happened in a group, and someone even managed to take a picture. Is the picture legit? It depends who you ask. Many would claim it's a total fabrication or an outright hoax, but some people would call it real evidence. The mermaid was seen again a week later, and after the locals got excited. Just like with the reward for $1 million in Israel from 2009, the local town newspaper put out a $25,000 reward for anyone who could catch the mermaid. There were arrangements made for the mermaid to have a place to stay when she was found, and the townsfolk promised to make her feel very much at home. But she clearly did not hear them because she never showed up. Of course, the whole thing was probably nonsense, but that has not stopped some of the people who still live in the small Canadian region from claiming mermaids live in their waters. Mermaids halt construction. In 2012, workers in Zimbabwe were scared away from their construction site because of an angry mermaid. This happened while workers were trying to complete the construction of 2 dams. According to the ridiculous story from the Daily Mail, the mermaid legitimately harassed workers while they tried to complete their duties. In Zimbabwe, mermaids are known as mamba muntu, and since the local workers grew up on folklore and mythology, they wholeheartedly believed the appearance of the mermaid was a horrible omen and that the dam should not be finished. In a completely unbelievable reaction, the local council hired white workers to continue building the dam so that they wouldn't be scared away by a supposed mermaid. But much to everyone's surprise, the white workers also left the construction site and vowed never to return because the river mermaid was being so incredibly rude to them. The local council members ended up needing to perform a special ritual to cleanse the development of the dam and appease the mermaid. So what do you think? Was there really an angry mermaid wreaking havoc on the workers, or was it all just superstition and paranoia? This seems like a bizarre instance of some strange people quarreling and scaring away the workers, but multiple teams of employees walked off the job. The whole thing is totally strange and bewildering. Mermaids can be black. Believe it or not, mermaids can be black too. We often see mermaids depicted as white-skinned with colorful hair. I'm thinking of the famous lead character, Ariel, from Disney's Little Mermaid movie. She is an iconic mermaid and likely helped shape people's perceptions of what mermaids look like. But in most folklore, this isn't actually the case. Remember the huge issue back in 2019 after Disney announced that they would have Halle Berry play Ariel in a live-action remake of The Little Mermaid? If you don't remember, there was a huge racially charged uproar about it. But the truth is that there are mermaids in a lot of different cultures, and guess what? Most of them are not white. There are water elementals from Africa, beings that are half serpent and half human. There is also the deity Orisha from West Africa, who is often depicted as being a mermaid. The Aboriginal people in Australia have stories of mermaids, none of which are very white, and even in India there are half serpent, half human creatures that look a whole lot like mermaids. Don't forget the stories and folklore from the Caribbean, from Chinese mythology, and from Japan. There are stories about mermaids from almost everywhere on Earth, and the truth is that most of them have pretty dark skin. So think about that the next time you're trying to imagine what a mermaid would look like. The truth might surprise you because mermaids are as diverse as human beings. Plus, they have fishtails, so it's hard to focus on something as superficial as the color of their skin, right? The South African Kaimon. In South Africa, there is a legendary mermaid creature known as the Kaimon. And in 2008, it was making big waves in local news. It all went down when a group of friends camping near a river heard a loud splash followed by some banging. After a bit of investigation, the group apparently found a woman in the river. She was pale white, had long black hair, and kind of looked to be glowing, but she also had piercing red eyes. The mermaid creature cried out, then vanished into the river. Of course, this could have just been one big group hallucination, then again, it could have been real. Some people in South Africa are extremely afraid of the legendary Kaimon. She is known for pulling people under the water and trapping them there forever. I suspect that the truth is that this monster is a combination of stories of sea serpents, hippopotamus, and maybe even crazy loners who live in the river and scare people off with threatening nighttime activities. A real mermaid is hard to believe. The Scottish Mermaid. Scotland has a long history of monsters, legends, and mysteries. They also have a lot of mermaids in their folklore. There is a story from the 1800s in which a mermaid was apparently killed by some people out in the Hebrides. It all started when a woman found a mermaid while cutting seaweed near the shore. The woman screamed for help, and a bunch of people from nearby rushed into the water after the mermaid. One of them threw a stone at the mermaid, then she disappeared under the water, but a few days later the mermaid corpse supposedly washed up on shore. The mermaid was small, pale, and had the tail of a fish, but without any scales. The story continues with the sheriff giving the mermaid a proper burial, but the grave of this mermaid has yet to be found in modern times. Some say that the grave washed out to shore, and others think it's just a silly legend. Still, there is the slimmest chance that a grave from somewhere between 1820 and 1830 is hidden somewhere on the island. The person who finds it would instantly become world famous, that's for sure. It might be worth searching around that part of Scotland to try to find the truth if treasure hunting is your passion. Mermaid Bones. In 2014, there was an apparent skeleton found on the east coast of South Island in New Zealand of a legendary mermaid. It was allegedly found by a crew of fishermen from Papua New Guinea. 7 fishermen thought they saw a female corpse in the sand from their boat, and they alerted the New Zealand Coast Guard. The Coast Guard got some help by the federal police since they thought they were going to find a dead body. But after the authorities went to the location, they found the skeletal remains of something that was definitely not a human. It looked like a mermaid. Apparently, the authorities actually tried to get some assistance from forensic experts from the University of Auckland to identify the remains that they found. Obviously, the legitimate discovery of a humanoid sea creature would flip the world on its head, but as of yet, there has been no official confirmation, and in fact, the whole story could just be a great big hoax. On the other hand, the authorities could have taken the remains of the mermaid and someone or something made it disappear before the story could be verified. The Orkney Mermaid. Our next story comes again from Scotland, this time from Newark Bay in the late 1800s. There were multiple mermaid sightings in the year 1890, and the legend of the Dearness Mermaid was born. This particular mermaid was not very good looking. The people who came forward claiming that they saw her described a humanoid creature at least 7 feet, 2 meters tall, with pale skin and black hair. She apparently crawled onto rocks using her arms, then would slide down into the waves with her fishtail. Of course, all the witnesses saw her from a great distance, so it very well could have just been a very tall woman swimming in the ocean. What's really interesting about this story is that all the witnesses reported seeing her only around 1890. In the following years, there were no sightings at all. It seemed like the mermaid vanished back into the murky depths, never to return. Could it have just been a curious swimmer? Could it have been an oddly human-looking whale? Or was it indeed a mermaid just coming up to say hello? Manatee or mermaid? This is probably the most ridiculous story on the list. The fact that anyone would confuse a mermaid with a manatee or the other way around is purely ridiculous, yet all the same time, sailors used to apparently mistake fat, happy manatees for legendary mermaids. The place where this happened the most, unsurprisingly, was off the coast of Florida. The legends say that when the ancient mariners were first sailing those waters and exploring the Caribbean, they would see manatees near the surface of the water and assume that they were mystical mermaids. The flipper might make a bit of sense. If you only saw the bottom half of the manatee, you might think it was a fat, gray-colored mermaid, but it is still pretty ridiculous. The most nonsensical example is Christopher Columbus, who, according to History.com, wrote in his ship's log back in 1493 that he encountered 3 mermaids in the water around the island of Hispaniola. He was apparently upset that the mermaids that he saw were not as beautiful as the stories he had heard. Columbus thought the mermaids were in fact ugly and way too masculine. And that makes sense considering they weren't mermaids at all and were probably sea cows. Christopher Columbus was obviously not the brightest bulb in the box. Do you believe in mermaids? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to come back soon for more. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe for all the latest videos.